I've got all 5 of my pieces here ready to go. I've got some small scrap blocks on the ground, and I've got some glue here ready to go as well. What we're going to do is get some glue on our pieces, and as that glue is drying, we're going to get it clamped up and ready to go. But I've got these blocks of wood kind of laid on the floor, and I'm going to use those for 2 things. The first thing is to support my workpiece right now so that I'm not setting it on the floor. So as I go to put glue in my workpiece, I can lay my piece on the floor and it's not going to get scratched by any glue or screws or anything that's laying on the floor. So that's going to protect my nice side. Later on, we're going to use those so that our clamps can clamp the workpiece and not damage the veneer. So right now we're going to go ahead and get some glue on this project. I'm going to use just a little bit of glue in the dados and rabbets. I'm not putting any glue in the back crack right now, just in the shelf dado. We don't want to make a big mess, so it doesn't take a lot. We're just kind of putting a little bead in each rabbet and dado. I'm going to do this on my other side as well. So I got glue in all 4 of, or both of my rabbets and both of my dados. Now we're going to need to assemble. We're going to need to work kind of quickly as we've only got 4 to 5 minutes of open joint time before the glue starts to set and cure. I like to put my project together so the good side is up. So my grooves for my backing are towards the floor. And the reason for that is when we're all done, these joints need to be flush. If these joints are not flush, what's going to happen is my face frame is not going to sit flush on the side of the project. My face frame would have a gap because that's not flush or even. So I'm going to, from the top side where my good face frame is going to be, I can make sure these are nice and even as I clamp. Now we're going to take some of our bar clamps and get them opened up to fit across the project. We're going to try to protect the veneer. The veneer is a thin layer of wood on the plywood, and we're going to protect that so that the veneer does not get damaged from the metal clamps, especially if they have some glue on them. So we're going to take some blocks of wood and put those blocks of wood between the clamp jaws, the jaws of the clamp, and then we're going to tighten up the clamp and secure that in place. So I'm right over that shelf with my clamp, so it's not pulling too tight on the top or bottom, and I'm just snugging that up right now. Now I'm going to stand the project up so I don't have to fight gravity, and now I can put my cleats in here without having to hold them and hold a clamp. So remember, my cleats are the 3-inch pieces. I want to make sure there's plenty of glue all the way down here. Take your finger if you need to spread it around a little bit. And we're going to put our cleat in there. And this first cleat is going to come all the way up to the front and be nice and flush with the project. The second cleat is going to go in the back, but we need to be in front of that groove. So we're ready to put our clamp on the top front here, making sure that cleat is flush. And now I'm going to use some blocks again up here to protect my veneer. I'm going to put those against the plywood, and I'm going to pull the clamp in tight. And now I'm going to tighten up that end. Now at this point, if this is sticking out slightly, you could take a mallet against the cleat and push it back and make sure it's pushed down nice and flush to the top. Okay, ours feels pretty good. I'm not too concerned about that. So we're going to tighten it up nice and secure. Now we can go to the clamp just behind there. We're going to go to the other side of the project. So again, as I'm getting this clamp or cleat ready to go, I need to make sure I'm in front of the groove for the backing on both sides. Make sure your distance is the same so that that piece is in there straight. on both sides. Okay, when you have it in there, we're going to take our blocks of wood again and protect our veneer. And tighten up the clamp. Okay, and so now our box has one more clamp to go down here on the bottom. So I'm going to roll the project forward so we can put a clamp down here on that shelf. So I'm just going to tip the project forward, set it down gently. I'm going to take my clamp here, open up the jaws, and tighten up these clamps on this joint. Again, I'm using my blocks of wood to help prevent the project from getting scratched up and dented. Again, you'll notice my clamp is right above my shelf so that we're not pulling in and making that those sides curve in as we tighten up too much. So right above the shelf is where the clamp should be. All right, I'm going to flip my project back over so I'm looking at the front side. I'm just going to roll it, stand it up, and set it over. And now we need to check for squareness. So let's get the project realigned here. All right, now we're going to check for squareness. I'm taking my tape measure. I'm going to measure at a diagonal from one corner to the other. And it doesn't matter which way, if I go to the outside corner or the inside corner, as long as I'm measuring the same spot both directions. So I'm going to come right up here to the inside corner, all the way to the far corner here. And I'm at about 26 and 5/8, or 25 and 5/8. We're going to measure the other direction. And we're 26 and about 1/8 by measuring the other direction. So I'm going to put a clamp on the longer side. The clamp is going to squeeze the project in and cause it to straighten up. So my clamp is going on the longer side at a diagonal. Okay, now I'm going to slowly rotate the handle down here, and I have to watch my tape measure. So I know that I was off about about a ½ inch. So I need to move about a ¼ inch. So I'm going to hold my tape measure on the short side. I'm going to slowly rotate the handle of the clamp, and it's not really going to get tight, but the cabinet is going to move as I am rotating that. And I'm going to split the difference so that the two numbers would meet until that is square. So measuring both directions from corner to corner, we should have the exact same size to verify that it is square. You could also take a speed square and check that if you would like, but measuring is going to be the most accurate way. We would then let this dry overnight, or at least an hour if possible. If you don't have the time to put the face frame on, then it will need to just sit here. If you have time in the class or block to now add the face frame, we'll show you how to do that. Okay, this could be 2 separate days. Maybe you glue the box one day and the next day you put the face frame on, or maybe you have it all ready to go and you can do it all in one day. All right, I've set up some sawhorses. We're going to put our project up on top of the sawhorses so that we can run clamps from front to back without hitting the floor. So we're going to raise the project up and set it up here. We're not going to grab the clamps. We don't want the clamps to come off. We're going to actually grab the box or the wood parts and set it up here gently. All right, now that we got our project on the sawhorses and secure, I'm going to need to get this ready. So because we're doing this all in one day, we're going to take this clamp off that was holding our project square. And what we're going to do is use our face frame now to square up the project. So we're going to have to get this clamp out of the way. And this clamp up here in the top is also going to be in the way because when we put the face frame on, we can't set it down flush. So what we're going to need to do is move this clamp, and what I would recommend doing is putting it down here on the end, but we can't tighten it very tight, otherwise we'll start to bend these little ears that are sticking off, these pieces of wood. So we'll loosen the clamp here. I'm going to move it down to the end so it's out of the way. And then tighten it up just gently. I don't want to bend these little tabs here. And so that clamp may just kind of sit there very lightly. It might be kind of loose, but I don't want to crank on it so it bends these in. Now we're going to take some glue and put glue on the surface of the plywood. We want to use just a little amount. We don't want an excessive amount. We don't want it to spill down the side of the project, either inside or outside the project. So I'm going to go around and put a little bead of glue on here. Okay, now I'm going to go through with my finger and kind of smear that around. I don't want that big round bead of glue. I want to control where the excess amount of glue is going in there. If you smear a spot and there's not much glue on there, you can put a little bit more in that section and kind of rub it around. The glue is what's doing the work, so we need the glue to hold the face frame nice and secure. I'm going to come to the other side now, do this shelf. When we're done, we've got glue on our hands. We're not going to have time to run to the sink, get it cleaned off, and come back. So what I would recommend to you is to use the sawhorse, not the top surface that's supporting the workpiece, but the underside. Take your finger, scrape the excess glue off on the underside of the sawhorse so that it's not on the top area that could get onto projects. Okay, now I'm going to take my face frame and very gently set it on the project, trying to kind of keep it even. I don't want to smear the glue around or take excess glue off, but I'm going to get it nice and flush along the top, or even along the top. And then I'm going to make sure I have an overhang on each side. This overhang is not going to be a lot. It's just going to be a little tiny bit, and we're not going to be able to measure it because it's such a small amount. So we're just using our hands to feel that the face frame has a small overhang on the box. Again, just a very small overhang on the box. Once you have this nice and centered on this side, we're not worried about the other side of the project right now, but on this side, we're going to come in and clamp it. We're going to use a wooden twist clamp to clamp the face frame to the top cleat. We're not using a bar clamp right now, because if I were to take a bar clamp from the face frame to the back of the project, I would move that bottom rail because there's nothing in between there. It would just want to slide up. So I am putting the clamp on the top rail and the cleat, the top cleat, and squeezing those tight together. Now that this end is taken care of, we're going to go address the far end of the project and get that lined up. So as I'm down here, we'll notice that the face frame is not even down here. There's a lip there, and on this side, no lip, and the plywood is actually showing. We don't want that. So we're going to have to straighten this up by pushing the face frame over and the box over and squaring those two to each other. So I'm going to get a clamp ready so when I push that over, I can tighten it up. This time I'm going to put my clamp right on the surface, no blocks of wood. And the reason for that is the face frame is solid lumber. We have 7/8 of an inch material to sand and clean this up, before we would go through this. So I don't have to protect the solid lumber like I need to on the veneer. You can if you want to, but you don't have to. Now I'm going to push that over to the other side and feel right up here, especially where that shelf is, that face frame has the same overhang. And then I'm going to tighten up that clamp. I don't necessarily want to truss right on the end, because remember that clamp right there could be pulling that sides in. So I want to check right up here where this shelf is and make sure that that is good. Now I'm going to put a clamp on this side. The clamp I have grabbed is a little too long that jaw is not going to hit the wood. If this happens to you, the bar is touching the floor and the jaw is not touching, flip the clamp around and have the excess clamp or bar up in the air. And we're going to put this on and pull this in tight. Okay, so I have kind of my 4 corners clamped. Now we're going to come and address the middle of the project, and we're feeling that the gap is the same all the way around. I can feel a slight lip here that's bigger than it is on the end. So that means my plywood is bowed in a little bit. So before we put a clamp here, we can push the plywood out so that it's a little bit more uniform of a thickness all the way across. So let's get our clamp in place. And I find it easier to manipulate the plywood from this side. I can really grab that face frame and push with my thumbs and make that even as I feel. So I'm going to push on the plywood with my thumbs, pushing the plywood out so that the distance with the face frame is even. When I feel that it's even, I'm going to tighten up my clamp. So I'm going to push and make sure it's even and tighten my clamp up all at the same time. You may need to have somebody else help you tighten the clamp as you push, especially if you have a big gap that you're trying to change here. Okay, so now that that's nice and even the whole way, we're going to come to the other side and do the same thing. That one feels pretty straight, maybe just ever so slightly a little indent here. So we could pull that out as we put the next clamp on. So again, I'm going to push that plywood out a little bit and then tighten up this clamp all at the same time, looking for a nice even gap the whole way across that face frame and plywood. We're going to come in now that we have the sides secured in the right location, and we're going to add a couple more clamps. Now the extra clamps are going to help pull that face frame down nice and tight to the box and make sure we have a good seal. It might seem like a lot of clamps, but really if we want a nice tight fit, this is what we should be doing, using plenty of clamps to hold it secure. All right, so here we are, all set. We're going to let this sit for at least an hour, again, preferably overnight if possible. Now there may have been a few times where you couldn't get the clamp directly on the project because of the small project. So you can see on this clamp here, it's pulling the face frame down to the project, but if you look underneath, I'm actually clamped to the sawhorse. The sawhorse is pulling the project up, which is pulling it tight into the face frame. That's okay. Also on this last one, we ran out of a little room. We put a clamp there to pull that shelf nice and tight. And you can see down here, we're actually clamped to another clamp. So again, that's okay. We're putting pressure up and pulling this down nice and tight. So for now, this would be a good stopping point for the day. Now, if you have more time left in your class or block time, then you would want to start working on the next portion of the project. And the next portion of the project is going to be the top and the door. We're going to build the top and the door of the project. So we're going to check against the plans, but we're also going to take some measurements here and see how big our things need to be. We're doing a 1/2 inch overlay. That means the door is going to overlay the face frame a 1/2 inch all the way around. So if I take my tape measure and pull this to my opening of my door, I'm at 14.5. So I need to add an inch on for my 1/2 inch overlay. So we're going to be at 15.5. That's how long my pieces need to be. And my door width should be about 10 1/8, adding that inch on, so 10 1/8. All right, now my top is going to have an 1.5 inch overhang on each side. So our project should be 12 inches wide. And we're going to add an 1.5 inches on the right side and the left side. So that's 3 inches total. So that's going to be 15 for a grand total. 12 plus 3 inches is 15. From front to back on this project is 12 inches. And we're going to only add an overhang on the front. This is going to allow the project to sit a little closer to the wall. Now you could put an overhang on the back, and that would give you a little room to run cords and stuff behind your nightstand or end table. That's up to you if you want the overhang on the back. It's a personal preference. So we're going to make this 12 plus 1.5 inches is 13.5. So we're going to take our solid lumber and we're going to work on rough cutting our pieces so that we can go joint them and get them to a straight edge. Over here at the miter saw again, the sliding miter saw, this is where we're doing our rough cutting. We're going to use the rest of our board up before we take a new one out of the wood rack and write that down. So find the remainder of your board from making our face frame, and that's what we're going to use to start making our top. So I'm going to rough cut off this board. I said I needed to finish at 15.5. That's my finish size. So I'm going to add 2 inches on to get my rough size, and that's 17.5. So I need 2 boards at 17.5 to make my door. So here's my 2 rough cut pieces for my door. I'm going to set those aside, and now I'm going to rough cut 2 pieces for my top. My top was going to be 15 plus 2 inches. That's 17 for our rough cut. So now we're going to take these boards and go get them jointed so they have a straight edge. Put the rest of your wood back in your work storage area. Put your name on there so there's no mistaking whose it is.